everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Amir's Anecdotes. Today, I have a very special guest and a dear friend of mine, David DeCelle. David, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, Amir, I appreciate you having me on. It's been awesome being a part of your life as a friend, as a coach, and seeing your growth over the years. And it's cool to be on your podcast now. So I appreciate you having me. But yeah, as a means of brief introduction, I've been entrepreneurial the majority of my life. From when I was in high school and college, I got finger quotes up right now, owning a boat detailing and repair company with a buddy of mine, aka just cleaning boats for cash. It wasn't a real company by any means, but it was still entrepreneurial nonetheless. After that, became a financial advisor, did that for about 7 years. And then the last 7 going on 8 years have been a consultant working with both financial advisors and just business owners in general, either helping them grow or helping them exit their business. So for as far back as I can remember, outside of, bussing tables as my first job, I've always been in business for myself in some way, shape, or form, which has quite a lot of benefits to it, but also its fair share of struggles along the way compared to, the folks who, have their 9-to-5 job, and each sort of person gravitate towards one of those paths, and those paths are neither right nor wrong as much as it is just making sure it's in alignment with how you're wired. And I'm wired to bang my head against the wall, hoping that this thing is going to work, and continuing to push to ensure that it does. So that's just, brief background.
Yeah. So that's really interesting that even the early days of your life, your bussing tables or your waiting tables or whatever, you're still getting tips. And so arguably that's not that different from being an entrepreneur and saying, like, I don't know how much I'm going to make this week. There's still not a set salary.
You're not wrong. And it's funny. So there was this gentleman back when I was bussing tables, who I still remember to this day. His name's Jack Bear. And he would see me like hustling around, and he was like the twice a week regular that would come into the restaurant. And the way that I got paid was a very de minimis hourly rate, plus the wait staff would basically tip me out, right? So to your point, it fluctuated. But I could count on Jack Bear always calling me over to his table and giving me $20. And what's funny about that is he gave me his business card, and it was a clear plastic red business card with gold writing on it. And I put it in a stack of business cards that I had at the time. Fast forward a number of years, my father became the general manager of a company, a manufacturing company, and his boss's name is Mark. And I got introduced to Mark when I was an advisor through my father. And when I went and met with Mark, he gave me his business card. And it was a clear red plastic business card with gold writing on it. And I was like, wait a second, this looks familiar. So when I go home, I look at my stack of business cards, and Jack Bear, who tipped me out $20 as a busboy every time he came into the restaurant, was Mark Bear's father, who started the business. And come to find out, Mark ended up being my biggest client I ever had as a financial advisor. So it's crazy how that sort of came full circle, from bussing tables, getting tipped out, to then making his son a client who happened to be my biggest client while I was an advisor.
Wow. Wow. What are the odds of that? Yeah. Wow. So you've always been in that kind of hustle mode. So were there ever periods in your life where you were like, I can't do this. I need to have steady employment. I need to know how much I'm going to make next week. Or you love that grind, like that particular amount of stress?
There was never a moment where I thought to myself, I couldn't do this. But there were plenty of times where I thought to myself, is this sustainable long term, or how long do these ebbs and flows last? Were instances where I second guessed myself in like a micro sense, but and perhaps we'll dig into this a little bit deeper, but when I transitioned from being an advisor to getting into consulting, I heard a lot from family members, friends of like, hey, why don't you just like go get a job, become stable and start that business later? And I said the same thing to every single one of them. I'm like, you don't get it. I'd rather live on the street than go and get a job. Like just straight up, I'd rather live on the street. And it's nothing against people who work a job. That's just not for me. And I was getting advice from people who had jobs. So their logical advice was, well, let me go ahead and tell them to get a job. But that just wasn't for me. There was never a doubt in my mind that I'd make it and be successful, but I'd be lying if I said that there weren't a lot of very, very long and let's call it depressed days along the way.
Yeah. The advice from friends and family thing is difficult because just because you trust someone doesn't mean that their advice is particularly good. And like ultimately it's not solving the problem, right? Like people have jobs and they're stressed out about money and they're looking at you stressed out about money. And it's not like they're saying, hey, I'm not stressed about money, do what I'm doing. They're also stressed and just saying, hey, you're doing it wrong. David, now for the audience that doesn't know you, because I obviously already know you, when you think about your life, obviously you are an entrepreneur, right? But what else are you? How would you like identify yourself? What are all the boxes that you would check on the world's longest self-identification checklist?
All right. So we said entrepreneur. I am happily married to my wife, Kennedy. Recently, and a follower of Jesus, which has been one of the most peaceful experiences that I've come across in my life. I am someone who I think cares the most, and I try my best to make sure that people know that I care about them. I'm someone who is an extremely hard worker who is blissfully dissatisfied. I am never satisfied where I'm at, but I try my best to remain happy along the way. I'm constantly someone who's looking to grow mentally, physically, financially, business-wise. I'm someone who always likes to solve a new problem, whether that's related to the business that I'm currently in or having a hand in starting a new one. But I think most importantly, I'm someone who tries their best in everything they do. It may not work out perfectly the first time or 2 or 10, but eventually I figure it out.
No, you're a lot of things, as are most people. And I think that's kind of the premise here. That's why we're here today, right? Because there is someone listening to this that is a number of the things that you are. So, and to that end, as a person, as a human being with all those different facets to themselves, what is the most stressful and most significant financial struggle and financial position that you've ever been in? The most significant financial decision you've had to make, or the most stressful?
So it was less so a decision and more so a situation that I found myself in. So I was always the financial advisor that the example that I used, I was a landscaper who cut their lawn last. I was the financial advisor who didn't follow the advice they were giving. And I didn't have my own financial plan based on how my income was structured. I'd make 10 grand in a month. I'd make 20 grand in a month. I'd make 0 grand in a month, but I would always live as if I was making money up here. So slowly but surely over that 7-year period, I basically had no money in savings. And I got up to probably about $45,000 and change in credit card debt, to the point, it was a big nut that accumulated over the years, to the point, Amir, where what would happen at that time was I'd be flirting with the limits on these cards, and I was behind on all my payments, right? So every day it was just a kick in the you-know-what, where they would either charge me interest, right, of course, because they're credit cards, which would then bring me closer to my limit, Or what even started happening was they would take my limit of say 5,000 and say, well, you now have a $2,500 limit. So then it got to a point to where I had a $2,500 limit and I owed $3,000, $4,000 on that card. So when you look at the utilization, obviously it's trash. So my credit just plummeted. And I was at my peak of credit card debt when I left being an advisor and got into consulting. I misread my deal with my former company, and I thought that I was getting about $3,500 a month in renewal payments. That was going to sort of be like my floor of income as I started the business. And come to find out, it was $3,500 for 12 months, not every month for 12 months. So it was like $300 a month, roughly speaking. So I thought I had this security.
Hold on one second. I just want to clarify. So you were a financial advisor for 7 years, racked up all this credit card debt, and then you made a career transition. Mm-hmm. So I assume at some point something's got to give. You hit that breaking point of credit card debt and fluctuating income. So how old were you when this happened? What year was this? What was the economic landscape like?
I was 27 years old. So I started being an advisor summer going into my senior year of college when I was 20, and then I started working there full time, right when I graduated. So I made the shift when I was 27 years old.
Got it. And now what year was this?
This year was 2017.
2017. Got it.
So call it, what's that? 7 years ago.
Yeah. 9 years after the financial crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're having your own financial crisis, but that's all right. You use that as a transition and a catalyst to now go into this consulting company. So go on.
So at that time I was like, all right, I have enough money to afford, $1,000 in rent, maybe room with someone. But then I realized I wasn't getting that money that I thought I was getting. I was like, crap, I have to go move in with my dad. And one of my friends at the time, he had just recently lost his father. And he was like, I would love to go live with my dad. And it just immediately shifted my perspective. So I ended up living there for 2 years. And I've had a lot of, that was the best time of my life. But that was arguably one of the best times in my life. We had so much fun. One time I was like, you want some ice cream? And he's like, yeah. So I got myself a bowl of ice cream. I got him a bowl of ice cream, covered it in chocolate syrup, but his was a bowl of shaving cream. Mine was a bowl of ice cream. And then he waited 18 months to get me back, his payback. He was committed to doing it. But my point is we just had a blast during that time, just busting chops and having fun. And it gave me the stability that I needed. But even then, Amir, I woke up at 4 a.m. and from about 4 to 7:30 or 8 a.m., I was reading and listening to audiobooks and podcasts. I was working out, and I was sending a crazy amount of LinkedIn requests, trying to build up my network of people that I was trying to serve, to the point where after doing that for too long, LinkedIn basically put a governor on my account, and I was unable to send a connection request for over 2 years because they basically got flagged for spamming. Right now, I had accumulated about 19,000 connections by that time. So I was like, all right, whatever. I have plenty to mine through right now, but I would do that until about 8 a.m. The rest of the day, I was creating content. I was doing free coaching calls. I was grossly undercharging to just get some folks through, in the door. And then at night, so think about this. Think about wearing a suit and tie every day for 7 years. And then at night, from about 7 to 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock, I'd get in my car and I would drive for Uber, just making a couple bucks. And then the weekends, I was digging holes, literally digging holes for a telecommunications company, and just playing consultant during the day and eating crap at night, and on the weekends, just doing what I needed to do to get by. over the course of a 12-month period with scraping and clawing, barely made any money that first 6 months in that transition. From a consulting perspective, made a couple bucks, right, from Ubering and digging holes. But I had the luxury of not really having a ton of expenses outside of student loans and walking around money because my dad wasn't charging me rent. And in a 12-month period, I got my credit card debt from about 45 grand down to zero. And then I had about 45 grand in the bank. So like total 180 over the course of a 12-month period, just by putting my head down and getting to work and frankly making the decision, Amir, that this is the worst I've ever been and it's the worst I'll ever be. I need to fix this, because if I bring this into my 30s, that's a problem I'm going to deal with for the rest of my life.
So this happened to you, you're 27. And so by 28, you had dug yourself out of that hole.
Yeah.
It's incredible. But you had no sleep, it sounds like, at all.
I still wake up really early. I like that. I also went to bed very early because at the time, I wasn't married. I was single, living at my dad's house. Like, dude, I was going to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock when I wasn't driving. But that was maybe like 1, maybe 2 nights a week. But yeah, other than that, I was, going to bed at 10:30, 11 or so, and then waking up at, 4:30 every day. So there was a lot of, call it undersleeping happening.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So you made the sacrifice, right? And I think that's what a lot of people, they want to do it, but they're not willing to. I mean, it's based on the timeline you're describing. I think you missed all of Game of Thrones, and that was a nationwide sensation, if not worldwide.
So it's funny that you say that, because I basically said, I'm giving myself 12 months to get my stuff together. I don't care what I miss out on. I don't care who I don't see. Like, I need to do this for me. I need to secure my mask before helping others, just like they say every time you get in an airplane. And it's funny that you bring up Game of Thrones, because I was always like, I don't like that type of show, like the medievalness, the this, the that, and I was just resistant. Kind of like I am with fantasy football. I've never done fantasy football, and I was like, I'm never watching Game of Thrones. And then I met my then girlfriend, now wife, Kennedy, and she convinced me to try it. Yeah, that show is fire. I love it, and I was so bummed that it ended.
But I'm glad. Caught up, right?
I caught up. It's done. But I'm glad I didn't discover it then, because that would have served as a distraction at a time where I needed none of that.
Yeah, no, that's the mental fortitude to not get distracted, especially in today's day and age. I think it's incredible.
Yeah, so, it takes intentionality for sure.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm sure that there are other people listening to this that might be exactly 27. They might be in their 30s. They might be in their 40s. That are looking at all their credit cards, floating the limit, doing balance transfers, and it's $45,000. And so they're thinking, well, if David can do it, I can do it. But now not everyone has the opportunity to live with their parents rent-free. So what was your plan? Like, if you didn't have that, do you think you still would have been able to do it, knowing now what you, like, looking back on then,
Well, I say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but my parents are divorced, so I would have just gone and lived with my mom instead. Like, let's be real. Sure. My parents wouldn't actually let me live on the street, but I don't know. I was fortunate enough to not have that be a decision, but I'd like to think that if I was put in that situation where I needed to make a decision of, like, I need to live on my own and I can't shack up with someone. I mean, dude, I would have served tables, made, servers at a decent restaurant make 50 to 80 grand a year. That's enough to, get me into an apartment, but I would need to be very diligent with my time. And those folks typically work later on, call it a 3 to 9 or 10. And I would have built my business in the daytime hours. So I would have done something, because I wasn't going to give up on the entrepreneurial dream that I had because of a speed bump. And frankly, what got me through those rather dark times was the fact that I monitored everything that went into my ears and into my eyes. So I would make sure, think about like, if you want to get in shape, yeah, exercise, but like watch what you put in your mouth. You want to get positive? Well, what are you listening to? What are you consuming? What are you watching? And everything that I was consuming had some sort of positive vibe.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing about your story is that, number one, I'm a licensed financial advisor, but you were at the time as well. And did you sit down and kind of go through all the different options? Because as I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, well, there was a whole bunch of other ways that you could have done this. All of them would have had different outcomes and the math would have been different, but there's an analysis you could have done. You could have declared bankruptcy. You could have done a credit relief program. You could have done an avalanche or snowball method. You could have potentially had your father co-sign a personal loan. Like all these other financial instruments and tools exist to have kind of solved that credit card debt crisis. You opted for waking up at 4 a.m., saving a bunch of money, living rent-free, tackling aggressively your debt, completely eliminating distractions from your life, and, skipping Game of Thrones, which I don't know if everyone else listening would have made that choice. So how much of that work did you do, or were you just single track mind of doing it the David way?
It wasn't doing it. So I'll preface this by saying this is my opinion and mine only. People may have their own opinions, and that's totally okay. But it wasn't a single-minded track as much as it was the right thing to do. And what I mean by that is I irresponsibly put myself in that situation and spent money like a jerk when I didn't have it. Like I had to, I didn't finish saying when they were lowering my credit limits, charging interest, is like when I would go out to dinner with friends or go out, drinking with friends or whatever, which I shouldn't have been doing because I had no money. I would go into the bathroom right before the bill came to go through like 7 different apps on my phone to just see which card I should use that had enough space on there to cover the bill so it didn't get declined. Like that's what I was doing for like 6 months, like literally walking around with a stack of credit cards on me, like, well, which one is it going to be today? But my point is, to go back to that that I irresponsibly put myself in that situation. I'm not going to, and again, not saying that these are right or wrong, but for me, it wasn't right. I wasn't going to declare bankruptcy. I wasn't going to have my dad sign a personal loan, co-sign a personal loan. I wasn't going to do those things that required skating away from what I had done to myself or getting someone's help and relief. I was going to own the problem and take care of it myself. That's just how I'm wired. Like with the digging holes as an example, I forgot to tell you that I didn't make any money digging holes because the holes were $7.50 a pop, and they would take like 2 to 4 hours depending on the hole you were digging. It was like trench. And I was like, well, $7.50 a pop. So I did a few, and then it was like an endless list that could be done. So I put together a team of like, all right, my cousin, my friend, this, that. And I was like, hey, you want $350 to dig a hole? And and they knew that I was project managing and making money off of it. Well, the way that the payment terms worked was you got paid, I can't remember if it was 60 or 90 days after the job was completed, and digging the trench was only a piece of the job. So I basically told them, hey, once I get paid, you'll get paid. Well, we generated a total of like $50,000 in revenue in like a month and a half, 2 months, and never got paid. Got paid like a couple bucks, but basically got screwed over. No contracts, nothing. So on top of the 45 grand in debt, I failed to mention the 20 some odd thousand that they were expecting to make. Yeah. I also, having not made any of that money myself, out of my Uber money and my consulting money over that same 12-month period that I paid off the 45,000, I also made all of them whole for the labor that they allocated towards it, which I didn't have to do. but I had to
Wow.
do because it's the right
That's-
thing to do. So it's total of like
That's
65
incredible.
G's
I mean,
that paid off.
Next time you tell the story, you should go with the 65 because that's significantly more impressive.
Well, I don't know if that's a good competition to get into. Of like, well, I had 85, I had 65. It's like the battle of the losers.
Yeah, seriously. But listen, the real kind of takeaway from your story, I think, is that there's no substitute for discipline and hard work.
And taking ownership, because like I feel like people are easy to pass the blame and whatnot. But there's a book that I read called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL. And you can pretty much deduce what the book's about by the title. It's about taking ownership about absolutely everything. But obviously, it's still well worth the read itself. But yeah, I had a decision to make. Was I going to pass this off to someone else? Is this the life I was going to lead? Or was this going to be a defining moment in my life for the better? And thankfully, that's the path that I chose.
Yeah. Wow. So, similarly, using that lens of me as a financial advisor, as I'm trying to take the empathetic approach of someone who's listening to this, I think there's a lot of value in everything that you laid out today. But I also think it's important to recognize that because you were an advisor, you had more tools at your disposal, I think, than other people had. Meaning you knew about the options of personal loans and bankruptcy and all of these other avenues, and you opted to not use them. I think the general public or someone else listening to this might not even know that those options exist. And arguably, I would make the argument that the fact that those options exist as a potential tool is no different than you, as in your dad's house, rent-free as a tool to help you accomplish that end goal. Right? So you opted to not use the other tools, but you still did use the tool of your dad's house, right?
You're not wrong at all.
So anyone else listening to this, if they're in a similar situation, like you might not have that opportunity to live with your folks rent free, but I don't think you should not look into those other opportunities of bankruptcy or personal loans or other avenues of debt relief. But doing that on an educated basis, knowing what options exist, choosing what you're going to do, and having the discipline and follow through and ability to not be distracted and steadfast in your goal and plan, that I think is the most important element here.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize the two things. One is the path that I chose was just that, the path that I chose. Right. And there's other paths that people can do, and they're not right or wrong. It's just what is best for you. And for me, that was best for me. The other thing that I did is I didn't work with an advisor at the time because I knew enough to, like, I knew how I got in the situation. I knew how I could get out of the situation, stop spending and start paying it off.
Right.
You know, I'm oversimplifying it, of course. But
yeah, you're also 27. You didn't have kids and a mortgage and stuff.
Right. Who I did pay though, and this was a couple $100 a month for, I want to say it was a few years. And I exaggerate when I say this, but my credit score got down to like a golf score. It was pretty low. And, you know, to the point where if I wanted to get a personal loan, I certainly would have had to have a cosigner because there ain't no way in heck, you know, they're not giving me money. So I paid one of those credit repair law firms to basically go and dispute I think I got up to, what are the charges called? The
late fees and interest and penalties and things like that.
Yeah, those things. There's a term for them, forgetting, but basically disputed. I want to say it was either like 32 or 37.
Wow.
Like, Amir, I overdrafted on my bank account for, once a week for a year. So think about it, once a week for a year. Imagine the anxiety that I was going through at that time. Like, it was bananas. But
I unfortunately use Bank of America. The overdraft fee is $35. So
yeah, Bank of America stopped. Bank of America stopped banking with, or wouldn't allow me to bank with them anymore because I overdrafted so much. They kicked me out, dude.
That's ridiculous.
Like for real. I paid one of those credit repair law firms. Lexington Law is who I used. They got all of those derogatory
One.
marks. That's the
Yeah,
thing I
yeah,
was
yeah.
looking for. Derogatory marks. They got all of those off my
That's
credit
awesome.
report. So now I have an 800 plus credit score and have a house, plenty of money saved and in the bank and in my investment accounts. Income's great. But that's who I actually paid to help, because I
Sure.
realized that without credit, my options were limited moving forward in what I could do, because I dug myself in, such deep of a hole.
So over the course of that 12-month period, when you're trying to get out of that hole, pay off that credit card debt, was it month 4 or 8 or 12 where you hired that law firm to fix your credit on a move forward basis?
I don't remember. I'd be making something up if I said when, but when I moved in with my dad is when I just started putting everything in place. So I'd imagine it was within a few months of that.
Yeah, got it. So you had that amazing journey. You're better now. Where are you now, 7 years later?
So 7 years later, married to beautiful wife we just bought a 3,400 square foot, 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath house in Florida, with a pool. Income is in a very, very good place right now. Assets are in a very good place right now. Let's just say I can swipe my card freely, knowing that A, it's not going to reach the limit. And B, I can pay it off. I pay my credit cards off to zero every single month. So life is a lot better now. But again, term I used earlier, I'm blissfully dissatisfied. I continue to want to grow and help more people and have more of an impact, and in exchange get paid for that level of value provided, so to continue to grow in that regard, but doing my best to remain happy and enjoy the process along the way.
Right on. So, David, thank you so much for sharing your story. I have one last question for you, and then feel free to kind of plug whatever you got going on. So it's admirable that you made your cousins and your friends whole for digging the holes. But what about your dad for not charging you rent for the year or two? Did you make him whole on the rental income he lost?
I sent him to Italy.
Yeah, there you go.
I sent him to Italy. He had a blast.
Good man. Now, thank you. Tell everybody who's listening, what do you got going on, and how can they connect with you if they want to learn more or talk to you?
Yeah, so where I'm most active is on Instagram, just simply at David_DeCelle. You can also just Google David DeCelle and you'll find all my social links there on the first page that pops up. And then number 2 is I do host a podcast where I interview and bring on other entrepreneurs to learn about their journey, similar to what Amir guided me through here today. And it's called Business with the Boys. Boys is with a Z at the end. We're at the time of this recording, we're releasing our 22nd episode tomorrow, and we've had a lot of really, really good guests. So there is, I would imagine if you're an entrepreneur, there's at least someone in there that you'll resonate with. But if you do a good job listening in, there's usually a nugget in everything that you can consume that you can ultimately implement into your life. So at David_DeCelle and the Business with the Boys podcast.
All right, great. Thanks so much, David.
Appreciate it.